Good afternoon. Welcome to the final session of this year's Mind and Life Dialogue. In this session, we'll be talking about the intersection of Buddhism and science. And that session will go from 1 to 2 o'clock. After that, we'll have a closing dialogue from 2 to 2:45. So during the first session, we'll be hearing... So we'll have 4 presenters talking about the Buddhism-Science exchange. First, we'll be hearing from Geshe Lakdor, who's the director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, well known to you. He oversees monastic science initiatives. Next, we'll be hearing from Geshe Lobsang Tenzin Negi, who's professor of practice at Emory University and spiritual director of Drepung Losling Monastery in Atlanta. Then we'll be hearing from Geshe Dadul Namgyal, who's senior resident teacher at Drepung in Atlanta and distinguished translator now with the Emory-Tibet program. And finally, we'll be hearing from Yangti Rinpoche, who's the founding president of Maitripa College in Oregon and the spiritual director of multiple Tibetan Buddhist centers in the United States. So with these distinguished and very active scholars at the interface of science and Buddhism, we'll start with Geshe Lakdor. And each one will take 15 minutes.
With obeisance to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the reverend teachers, and my humble respect to all the distinguished scholars and everybody present here. The topic of our talk is related to the exchange of ideas between Buddhism and Western culture and the science initiatives, both of which are very actively done in the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. But to save time, I really would like to show a 10-minute video so that you get a feel about the library who is doing all these activities, rather than my trying to say a lot of things which will lead to a lot of digression. And after that, I will, as a form of conclusion, speak 2-3 sentences, and then I'll conclude.
Sound here, right?
Sound.
In the early years of exile, following the communist Chinese takeover of Tibet in 1959, refugees escaping to India carried hundreds of manuscripts and other sacred objects out of Tibet. On the arduous journey across the Himalayas, these precious objects and texts were often guarded above all else. Once safe in India, many of these sacred manuscripts were offered to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Realizing the impending threat and precariousness of the situation, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, among other endeavors, conceived of and founded the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives to restore, protect, preserve, and promote the Tibetan culture. The cornerstone for the library's impressive Tibetan-style building was laid on 11th June 1970 in the hill station of Dharamsala, northern India, the heart of the exiled Tibetan community. In November the following year, the library opened its doors for the first time, growing to become one of the most important and premier institutions in the world dedicated to the preservation and dissemination of Tibetan culture. To this day, Tibetans circumambulate the library day and night in reverence of the sacred objects and texts housed within.
This institute, Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, is established based on the vision of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The main objective of this institute is to preserve the unique Tibetan cultural heritage
which is not only a world cultural heritage, but which is a compassionate and non-violent culture. But unfortunately, this very important culture is facing threat of extinction in its own country, Tibet. So therefore, by preserving this culture, we'll not only be able to preserve the Tibetan identity, but we strongly believe that we'll also be able to make contribution for peace and harmony in the rest of the world.
The primary objectives of the library are to provide a comprehensive cultural resource center and to promote an environment that encourages research and an exchange of knowledge between scholars and students. These factors are of the utmost importance in a contemporary world shaped by political and spiritual confusion. In 1991, the institute was recognized as Center for Tibetan Studies by Himachal Pradesh University. In 1996, the Tibetan Parliament in Exile accorded the library the combined status of National Library, National Museum, and National Archives. On 3rd September 2003, the National Manuscripts Mission, an initiative of the Government of India, appointed the library as one of the National Manuscript Resource Centers. Having begun its life with humble collections of manuscripts and books in Tibetan and English, the library is now a repository for significant collections of artifacts, manuscripts, and other records, while also serving as a center for language and cultural education. It now houses 10 full-fledged departments, which include the administration, 2 significant libraries, a museum, audiovisual archives, research and translation department, cultural research, publication, oral history, and science departments. Holdings have grown to include more than 132,146 titles in the form of manuscripts, books, and documents, hundreds of Tibetan scroll paintings, statues, and other artifacts, and over 15,000 photographs and around 35,000 hours of audiovisual recordings. In addition to its general collection of books and manuscripts, the library houses rare books and manuscripts such as the 12th century handwritten Ashta Sahasrika, handwritten Pugda Kangyur, Narthang Kangyur and Tengyur, Shol Kangyur, and Peking Kangyur and Tengyur. Oral traditions are very susceptible to permanent loss should their transmission be interrupted. So, till date, the library's significant oral history project holds thousands of hours of recordings related to the Tibetan diaspora. The library also houses active Tibetan and non-Tibetan publication departments, which together have published more than 500 titles in Tibetan, English, and Hindi concerning Buddhist philosophy and other aspects of Tibetan culture, including journals and newsletters. As a center for education, the library has welcomed scholars and eminent personalities from all corners of the globe and has had a proud association with many of the world's most eminent Tibetologists. The Library of Tibetan Works and Archives is also actively working to develop relationships with world-class academic institutions around the globe to encourage cultural exchanges and other resources. As a result, the library has signed a memorandum of agreement with Federal University of Sao Paulo, Brazil in 2009, Kalmyk State University, and Russian Academy of Sciences in the year 2010. Realizing the importance of scientific education for Tibetan monastics and at the behest of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the library began a historic project in 1999 to introduce science to Buddhist monastic scholars. With the support of the Sego Family Foundation, more than 300 monks and nuns have completed their science education under eminent science teachers from around the world. On 11th June 2010, an agreement was signed between the library and Emory University in Atlanta to bring modern science education to Tibetan monastic institutions and bring the Tibetan science of mind into modern education by developing and implementing a comprehensive and sustainable science education program for Tibetan monks and nuns. Under the Emory-Tibet Science Initiative, around 100 monks and nuns graduated from 5 years of 1-month-long intensive science education from distinguished Emory professors. In yet another historic moment in the history of Tibet and Tibetan Buddhism, monks from various Tibetan monasteries were selected to study science at the Emory University. These monks formally undertook to study a field of knowledge beyond their curriculum, and that too in a Western university. After the completion of their courses, the first batch of monks are now serving as science teachers and leaders in their respective monasteries, while the second batch continues their education. The Library of Tibetan Works and Archives is not only a library, a museum, and an archive, but also an academic institute where cultural and educational courses, seminars, conferences, workshops, and lecture series are held, providing wider avenues of learning and sharing the knowledge that helps promote an environment which fosters research and an exchange of knowledge among scholars, researchers, students, and interested general public. Using modern media and technology in restoring, protecting, preserving, and promoting the Tibetan culture is another initiative by the library. The library has so far scanned and digitized numerous rare documents, pictures, and recordings, thereby laying the foundation for future production of them in formats of the changing technology. In its more than 4 decades of service, the library has made significant contributions at numerous fronts in preserving and promoting Tibetan culture. The Library of Tibetan Works and Archives is confident in its role of preserving and educating others about a compassionate and non-violent culture facing threat of total extinction in its own homeland. Now, in its 5th decade, the library continues to develop as the need for such an institution becomes more urgent. The library holdings increase every year, and enrollments in philosophy, language, and cultural courses continue to climb. Each year sees an increasing number of visitors, researchers, and students drawn to this institution, which is able to provide them with an educational and cultural experience hard to avail elsewhere in the world. With much achieved and much planned, the library looks forward to more fruitful years to come.
I will already 10 minutes past. I'm aware of the time. So I will just make a brief outline how we are overseeing many of the science initiatives that are taking place due to the guidance of His Holiness. The Science for the Monks is an initiative that took place since year 2001 to 2007. That was followed by the Sagar Science Leadership. The leadership program came into being because we felt that it's important not only to give the basic science education, but also to create a network of science teachers or others who do the field work in different monasteries, so that whatever projects we want to complete, we have the networking. It is only that way that we can work. And then we also gradually started the monastic graduates program, which included Khembos, Geshes, Lopens, because we felt it's important to in a way, the top-down kind of approach, so that it will be more effective for this initial program. And then we also started a number of conferences, and also exhibitions that went to US, India, Nepal, Bhutan. And then we had the Emory-Tibet Science Initiative coming in 2008, which Geshe-la will talk about it. Then we also have this project of translating scientific terms and publishing bilingual scientific texts. And because of all this enormous amount of work, we also opened a separate science department in the library so that we are in a much more efficient way to handle all this. And the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives is also, from 2014, working with the Department of Religion, Central Tibetan Administration, for another science program with select monks. And the library staffs are also teaching science to the nuns in the nunneries in the vicinity of library. And the library is also connected to the Young Tibetan Scientific Society. In the very beginning when they started, we have a connection with them. And we have very much hope with these young people, and your advice and support are very much needed for these young people who have that initiative. And then one of the most major achievement was being able to introduce science study as a part of the regular monastic study. And the library is also fortunate now to be able to become a co-local organizer with this one and the previous Mind Life conferences. So in this way, what I'm really trying to say is the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives is fortunate that we got connected to all these science endeavors which are taking place under the guidance of His Holiness Dalai Lama. And the next few points that I would like to talk about is the topic challenges and opportunities. And I always feel that challenges itself, if you face it, will give you the opportunity. And to face that challenge, what we really need to do is to make the students, the monks, to be able to see the goal, the benefit of it. And it is through this way then you will be able to actively engage into it. And for example, just to give one or two examples, during many of these monastic programs, we have these days monks and nuns from over 20 different traditions. When they spend 1 month long together, they become friends, which is the best form of dialogue between the Tibetan Buddhist school traditions also. It's very informal, friendly discussion, and long-lasting discussion. Then about getting insights, of course, as we have already heard from the learned speakers during the last few days, with this kind of exchange, when you open up, so much knowledge you can get. So that's very clear. I don't have to elaborate on this. And my personal kind of focus was more on action. Ideas are very important. It always slowly make you change, become better, and things like that. But it's very difficult to do away with the die-hard habit. So forgive me to mention one point. For example, using the plastic bottled waters, which is taking place everywhere, including this conference also. So it's my humble appeal that next time we should be conscious of such things and start doing small bit like that, so that we can see the impact and see the difference. Otherwise, the die-hard habit is not going to go away so easily. So that is, I think, all I have to say. And I'm tempted to conclude this by citing some lines which His Holiness mentioned in the universe in a single atom in the concluding chapter. Today, in the first decade of the 21st century, science and spirituality have the potential to be closer than ever and to embark upon a collaborative endeavor that has far-reaching potential to help humanity meet the challenges before us. We are all in this together. May each of us, as a member of the human family, respond to the moral obligation to make this collaboration possible. This is my heartfelt philia. This is a philia which His Holiness made, and I really would like to remind you about all this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geshe-la, and thank you for your good work. We need help queuing up the next presentation. And we'll now be hearing from Geshe Lobsang Tenzin Negi, who among his many other roles is the director of the Emory-Tibet Partnership and the Emory-Tibet Science Initiative.
कुशलोस इसका उल्टा हो गया. His Holiness is teasing him, saying maybe people from Kinnaur Valley have to wear the opposite way.
Your Holiness. His Eminence Ganden Rinpoche, His Eminence Charpa Chuche Rinpoche, and His Eminence Chansi Chuche Rinpoche, esteemed members of the Venerable Sangha, and distinguished scholars and the presenters here. It is a great honor and privilege for me today to present to you the progress on the Emory-Tibet Science Initiative, an initiative that is formed in collaboration with Library of Tibetan Works and Archives to develop a comprehensive and sustainable science education program for Tibetan monks and nuns. It certainly was a great honor for Emory-Tibet Partnership, a partnership that Your Holiness inaugurated in 1998 to foster a cross-fertilization between the Tibetan and the Western forms of knowledge. And in 2006, when Your Holiness invited us to collaborate with the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives to develop this program, that was a great honor for Emory University. Certainly, a program like this, its aim is not only to impart modern science education for the Tibetan monks and nuns, but His Holiness's vision here is to prepare the future contemplative collaborators with the science so that the knowledge, new knowledge can be formed which can have a tremendous benefit for the humanity at large. We seek to develop a comprehensive and sustainable program for the monks and nuns. When the Emory-Tibet Science Initiative was launched in India, of course it was launched at Emory in 2007, but when it was launched in India, Your Holiness made the remarks that this was a dream for long to bring in modern science in the monastic education, and gradually it materialized through the programs like Science for the Monks, Science Meets Dharma, and with the partnership with Emory University and the library, its collaboration with the library, now that this was providing a more stable foundation for such an education to be developed and to implement it. Obviously, this was a very tall mandate for us to develop a comprehensive but a sustainable program, which for us signaled that we have to be very careful, give all the considerations in developing the program that is viable for the monastic education. And therefore, we began with a development phase or the pilot where we wanted to first seek the direction as to which disciplines of science we needed to cover, and fortunate for us, Your Holiness gave that direction, and that was to develop courses in neuroscience, physics, and biology with some math. We also consulted with various scholars who had in-depth knowledge in both Western and the Tibetan traditions, such as the esteemed scholar here, Geshe Thupten Jinpa, and other scholars, how to design a course that can actually be fitting for the monastics. And with that, then we began this pilot phase for 6 years in Dharamsala, where we brought professors from Emory and created bilingual text forms both in Tibetan and in English, and that translation phase that my colleague Geshe Tamtunla will say more about it. But with preliminary textbooks that were specifically created by our faculty for the monastics, we brought in those two classes, two cohorts, 91 monks and nuns from 22 different institutions to Dharamsala, and for 6 weeks annually, an intensive education were provided to them, as the result of that, in 2012 and 2013, those two cohorts, the first graduated in 2012 and the second in 2013. Just to hear from Your Holiness this validation for us was a great, great honor, where Your Holiness mentioned at the graduation that for the first time in Tibetan history, monastic students are graduating from a modern science course after having studied it not for a day or two, but for continuously months and years. Now, developing a course for these 6 years was only the first step, although a major milestone. But we needed to find how we can implement in the monastic educations. And thanks to the leadership in the Gelug tradition, under the leadership of His Eminence Ganden Tirumbuche, the leaders of the Gelug order convened this special meeting, the 6th Annual Conference of Gelug International Foundation, in 2012, where they adopted a resolution to integrate the course developed by Emory and the library collaboratively to bring that in the core curriculum, not just a kind of ad hoc basis, but to make this a core part of the monastic education. And with that decision taken, we began the next phase, that is the implementation of the 6-year course. And the 6-year courses are offered at 3 locations simultaneously, at the Sera Monastery, Ganden, and Debung monasteries. In summer, for 5 weeks, professors from Emory and the other universities, they come through the Emory-Tibet Science Initiative at these 3 locations to teach for 5 weeks those texts that are prepared by the professors at Emory. Providing the text, of course, are important because the monastics, they distributed these texts in advance so that they study this. And then, in addition to that, the professors also develop video lectures based on those texts. And then those video lectures are also distributed to the monasteries in advance. Now, at all these video lectures, each year, are produced in all 4 disciplines. With the implementation, we added the philosophy of science as part of the first year program. And with video lectures and the textbooks that they receive and that they study. But as much of the learning science is hands-on, they have to actually get into the labs. So as the monasteries are building science centers, Emory University also provides funding for the computers and other lab equipment, as well as the funding for the salaries for year-round unfolding of those texts to the monasteries here. There are 9 monasteries that are participating in this. Tashilumbo, Seraje, and Me, they study here. Debung Gomang, Debung Losiling, Ratwe Monastery monks, and a small Saika monastery that is based in Munkut. They participate at Debung, and then Ganden Sharse and then Ganden Jangse, they take part in Ganden Monastery. One of the major challenges of the implementation phase is, of course, to impart this education in a very effective way. And for that, we decided that for the first go-around, for the first 6 years, we will bring the faculty from Emory universities, and these 4 here And then you will recognize Dr. Carol Worthman. These four are the leaders that they coordinate in these 4 areas. And the challenge for us to find enough teachers. This year alone, we had to bring 42 science teachers in the summer. Next year, it's going to be 60 science teachers. By 6th year, when the course is in the 6th year, because there are 6 classes, then we will need 114 teachers. And so far that we have been very fortunate to see the enormous interest among the faculty, not only at Emory, but there are various universities participating in this. All this material that we have developed, the books, the video lectures, these are all available online on the website for free distribution for all the monasteries, nunneries, and even in Tibet, there are people who receive this material. So one kind of concern that I have right here is that although we are providing this material, we are providing this material to every institution, the monasteries and nunneries, but so far we have not been able to actually provide the summer intensives to the nuns. And I wonder if it might be possible for the nuns to also participate at one of the locations, whether that will be practical or not. I'm finishing. Another concern, of course.
So what is the reason? Do you have any idea why that you are not able to do it in a nunnery?
Well, one of the main reasons is we have 3 locations simultaneous at the same time we are providing. So it means that 3 teams of faculty need to come. To add the 4th one, it's a financial part, but also just to get enough teachers, the 4 groups of teachers. So I wonder that if the nuns can participate in one of the locations or they distribute it among the various locations. Whether this is something that we are certainly looking at adding the 4th cohort of teachers, if possible, in the future. Another major concern for implementing this science education has to do with whether bringing modern science will undermine the traditional monastic studies. And therefore, to assess that, we conducted some surveys after offering these courses for 2 years, and that with those 2 classes of the monks at Debung, Sera, and Ganden, we found that a small percentage of monks certainly found that 5-week intensive, like the taking 5 chunk of time for 5 weeks, it did affect their time for traditional studies, for memorization, attending classes, and so forth. But major proportion, 69%, they said that it had no impact on the time for the studies. But even greater than that is when we asked that if the modern science education was beneficial for them, with the 96% reported that it was beneficial. It was beneficial to not only to learn new concept, but to understand Buddhist concepts in some cases. It gave them confidence about the Buddhist principles itself, raised new questions about Buddhism, and opened new avenues for ideas. And one thing that it doesn't seem to impact on the traditional study also is, I'm very fortunate to report to you, His Holiness, that, for example, the 6 scholars that under the program Tenzin Gyatso Science Scholars we bring to Emory University to study for 2 years. and so that they become the teachers in the future in the monasteries. 2 of these cohorts have already graduated and have come back. A number of them have gone to Geluk exams, and they have done very, very well. For example, Thupten from this monastery, actually, that in his class he stood first, not only the first, but between the first and the second with a 40 points margin, the difference. So all the others who have gone through Geluk exams also have done very well. And the 3rd cohort is at Emory University right now. Another part, as I mentioned earlier, it has to do with the funding, and we have been offering this. For example, this year alone, we dedicated 1.4 million, and these are distributed. That a large part goes to the 6 scholars. 120,000 of that actually comes from Your Holiness, from the Potang, the Dalai Lama Trust, and then and His Holiness has also, over the time, contributed $1.1 million that we have kept in an endowment so that we can continue. So, Your Holiness, the potential for this program to contribute to the discoveries of new knowledge that can contribute to humanity is truly tremendous, and only a visionary like Your Holiness can conceive of such a program and to see it through. All the faculty members, many of them are here, that who have participated, deeply believe in your vision. And the Emory University, the many faculty, including President Wagner, who is stepping down next year, that have been very, very thankful, great supporter. I pray for long prayers from Your Holiness and the Sangha for his life, a good life, and great long life for him and his family. And for myself personally, there is no greater purpose than to serve Your Holiness. And I pray to be cared for Your Holiness from life after life.
Thank you. Thank you, Yoshila. Beautiful. Here. Annette, can you help? Okay. Next, Geshe go.
Yes. 최대 탈이야. 다디. 다소 시시 주조되네. 산제베 최. 지금 람도 루스 더부잖니. 저대바 뭐임바. 지 균전신에 잡아터버지 뭐이나? 지 그게 천리 아직 남자한테 지고로 지금 뭐한금 리그나라 맞은가 봐줄 서버서 나 송셔버 되다 천리 샤베 있는 천리기 뭐한금 리그디 14가다 그다 자치무 좋아래 딘지기 다 낭베디다 샤민도 삼아 추스데 낭베 조 시담바니 람 탑신 있어 아니 지 댄신 남자다 아니 지수제 고로지 그게 섬나려 여대 버진바이나 지수는 게서 패시 요마래 그런 거를 천시샤게 나 저리지 지고 말다 나 저리지 마지막 되게 내 최대 누구도서는 견능도 각힘도 돼 저리네 예매네 간다 템버시드 아니 땡리양라 주니신 드르마 송야제다 아니 하고를 지겠다 다외고 드르마 송야제다 견네 아니 저 창조가 섬다 동력 다래 지금 천별지 좌로 가봐이나 진짜게다 내가 하고지기 아는 아주 지금 로중 제시하다 냠린체다 내가 하고지기 다 이게 떠주다 lov죠 저는 야마로 저 드린 인도산에 저 드리샤 수수제 소수 산제베 최기 땡기 식지로디 야우시 그게 아 셴마신 하다 되게 나 되게 마신 버지면 있나 아직만 더버지도 아니 나르지 타 아니 먼저 사체 먼저 뭉치사 서로 드스체디 아니 가서서는 근데 다내 먼저 배 줘서 좀 그거 잔식으로 거 야우지 그게 고아도 마찬가지 근데 잔식은 안 주는 이유다 kumshi 소지가 친절을 줘야 돼. 생각이 내가 그 동문도 내가 요즘에 가는 게 참 주스도 앞에야래. 아니 링을 주시고 아메리카도 말에 주스페 용어요. 사이는 지금 뭐야지 참 친절을 누구도 또 쓰잖아요. 아직 다 님부 매봐 공공으로 지기. 얘는 그러나서 잘 쉬고 줘야 돼 버리지. 이제 공중신 숨고요. 수조대 지금 산재배 처를 신의 대화도와지다. 아니 지금 영어로 전부 여덟이나 어떻게 구조체도 전혀 말이야. 전진 양각게 또 수조된 거는 저 단세 비지 체계한다. 아다지 지난주 지금 책감부 장장 실럽체. 그게 생부 띵네 지금 산재배 처를 신의 대화도와지기 다 소야도 개심을 시작했어. 나디 치 그게 답나는 거 주변에 지금 시라마를 지금 좀 전에 하는 시에 있잖아요. 어다 시라마도 쓰고서 소시 마도에 10가 소화서 용도 하다. 가서 그게 낭외슝 나로래다. 그저지 그 교목을 숨주잖아. 고시로서 그 용도 와. 아 소스에 지금 리베 잡아베 탈 투고지다. 지기 타네 에는 남샤 샤샤버디디 치즈음 리베 잡아이나 열이야 네버 토야서지. 다바나다 천리 타네 가서랑 것도 계속 중소화. 지 강사 쌀쌀쌀 파파파 시즈네 다 때네 딱왜 강이야지. 다 여러녀로 로지도 와. 다가는 시 컨트롤 시엔에서 소 전직면에 최생문에 주매도 받고 다 여러녀로 로지도 와. 아니 engem ju dawa de shedi the samkham rigwe go de shebe yin ani ji ja ga phagwe yu yang gong gan zo ta ba na len de chu ju gi samkham rigwe ta dang gan zo pebe lo dong zha ta ge zhen ya da gu dim de ye de ba ti de da tang sang zong lin ge samkham rigwe go shebe yin ani tang sang zong lin ge samkham rigwe de ani ji bu shun ju ge da kindergarten ge so bi da ga ge me de ba so da di 생각 경험도 좀 묻지게 돼 이초체 도나체 되기도 와. 지나도 이 초 연구도 셔배 있는데 배질 진짜기 그게 가서 그래. 태송계야 소로 된다. 근데 배질 아용성기. 나 뒤죽 차네. 다 지금 론진체야래. 여장체야래. 다 되게 타려야 준비 뒤존자 소리인데 거기다 용시거든. 나 드즈체디 컨저스도 와. 현지 봐. 다무시한테 천일을 생각이 긴도부 용서로게 러야게 말와 배자 용서로 말와 저다 뒤에를 말 가서 되지 지금 뒤에다 다가 캠부나마서다 지금 기견수체니 그냥 상당 버리셔 구두체 지금 그게 견접하야게 시르든지 연구도는 디시도 컨디스도 와 전 되게랑아 너 저보지 계시죠 당연히 들을 내가 싸워지 제일 뭐이나 그 신의 지금 냠용으로 싸지 두수인데 견적해 봐도 용식을 했어. 견적 전부 중앙다가 어디다 야오면 두실 봐이나 경을 다스. 나도 최선을 삼다고 그러. 최선 삼다면이나 다들 전부니 네가라 다 들은 주서집에 갈래 되어래. 간다 지리산 얘기죠. 하고도요. 표 강제는 정말 여대배 배 날린데 취규디当时我生的是呢我살을 깨네 내가 밤에네 뒤쳐디 저명의 미주의 돈아 사업시 되거든. 말아서 당연히 당 코르 장장셔도 세대요나 되야요 말이. 봐. 말아서 뭐네 다지 남주기 그게 가서다 남주기 셀레 탐배 지 시세 고도 강섭지 여대버 뒤에 단 전문의 질을 샴들 주야다. 전문의 질을 판단하지. 그러나 저 건주 땡주 부두숨제 나네 천지기 대신 직체 아니 떠주고 대신 나라 den시도 샤샤나 산제베 쳐든 타그런 좋아요. 대민기 지 대니기 남샤 서로 지금 다 드즈체디 간다 질기다 간다 나네 미트버사디 고 시고야지다 드즈체디 고 개심을 쳐도 와 这种这就的按照速度去，根据不的什么样呢？绝产呢，这是什么钱呢？上级别参与过这，做三方这个过参与，但呢，你定义的说话就是得入过这，钱呢，那都不什么钱，那可能是把团队要第一的，但根据按照垃圾第一的拿了呢，但人们的急了，这个上级别却别个是嘛嘞，人们的急了，那么就空头别的，三方这个就是在忙着写对啊这，但是呢，落重要的。但这判断要的，我在听的印度上呢，的刚刚要的，刚刚全部是军事的写的，我在的要我们都是那位呢，我说70的军人的什么成绩，叫什么？在听的印度，那刚刚拆的不第一，这样子只有干用的就，我有那时候听不起，刚刚可能3个多，到底什么大的下
？Was it translated at all? No. Translated. So I'll just give a little summary. This was in responding to Geshe Lobsang Tenzin La's presentation of some of the challenges, based particularly on the survey that was conducted. On the question list, one of the questions was, does the teaching of science affect your faith in the Dharma, faith in Buddhism? And there were also questions about whether the actual...
나무도 지금 대부분다 도와 있는 자네 할람 다 천 남짓보도 아니 부딩에서 교행들의 용이요. 단 남짓서 어떤 도서관에 참아서대 간다 규율하면 교행도 뭔도 이제 어쩌자 어다 우무주고 아자자 근데 교행 뭔구이다. 맞아 디시라나 교행에서 고마 좋아. 세리를 괜찮은 디디 그저 왔다가 자 아이나 딱 그 가다가서 직프게 떠서 직프게 가서다 등신 청해주 기한다 전서 패진 개요서 지 애니네 체리 럽네 멀럽네 지 컴퓨터나 때문에 서로다 듣는데 전이 대응 고도 뒤주 튕기 자기 매베 커둘러 랑가를 야만 러셔 되셔리네 즉 딱세 동야 서로 듣는 용되게 하리 다 벗어나네 지 근데 지금 때문에 알아서 되는 마음심을 그들이야. 아니, 힌디기 샤지지 때문에 저도 지지 때문에 저도 근데 샤대야 좀 샤고도. 이 체리는 좋은스게 말다. 근데 천한저 직수 따도 하고 싶어. 양배 이 가서 컴퓨터 저 자원에 가고 그러면 탈로 거래. 따조 도타 소수 삼는 날이야. 나다 네 인구매배 아니 남인 교리 사버지 삼을 거리나. 아니 그것도 소수 런점 다 가서 런점 런소스다 다 쪼들이셔 디용래야 다 뭐는 아주 대표서 싸울로르신 제셰디디 찍드니기 야가 개변 저버리 애니 양고 표 강신 개버준 저버디도 막 때문에 뭐주체 강성 못 쳐버디디 애니 최단으로 딱세당체 좀더 제니 유르자네 딘저기 토네 배 섬리야 네버도 되시면 있나 괜찮이 한번 섬리 다들 인도 다른 가족은 총도도 저기 폐지 그래서 배자 먹고 삼는 날 안주 럽시버디 아니 딱 원에 지고 시진도 버도 삼 폐지 돼서 저래 다 두든지마다 기란이 다른 무시 제기라서 바코스부디 대응 배시 때 편도 그것도 봐 편도 도면도 편도 도가야 봐 소소 퍼스트 소소 결기 지 강에 채비네 또시 삼는 날이야. 지금 삼도 안 해봐 샤도 봐. 봐. 내가 더 저한테 침상 강에 채비 그 돌이야. 다 아니 김기다 강에 지금 배잖아 송셔서 삼 거인도 다들 레이서 챙기고. 셴메서 강에로 또서 채비다가 아니 배트칼 딱 가서 배 하나를 털지. 그래야. 쉬울 잡아야 해. 더 드리인도 제 간다다 조다 드리샤 제 그것은 딱와 시대들이 아니 가서 망도 죽을었어 망도 터바다 망도 터셔버디 다슝다 전에 순서로 지는 다시 다시 냠는 지하스 게임도 디 시 리멍구지 뭐는 전에 왜 카요라요기 상도 동다리야 캐버를 쉬우셔다 어디즈체디 그 신주야들이 건설하다 네 모습이 기시진지요 타마 퍼진 때에 그도네 럼림들 자니 즉 상담도 되는데 근데 요야도 봐 아니 그 현대 문화지가 그 배서 커질 때부터 뒤속이 심규 주도라다 지금 뭐냐 전에겠다 좀 전에 처리야 띵내다 녀냐지 현실성의 레슨고 뒤지서로 보라 그거를 니도 잡았다 저 최전에서 유명한 신심은 나도 댄시로 에모 케벤이 샤워로 공도 추기로 대서 강가코는 효를 지시 금민주로 손해야 돼 야구 상담나 댄댄다 디디 그 쉬우시도 상어들이 인들 배지 챙겨줘다 게르샤 내 체를 러브스 러브데 난 게요 말다 대처라서 그게 그도 사도 배지 챙겨줘 게요다 신소 세리 로좀 때니 답에 남이 쳐르치 난 배지다 투수치는 무슨 몰라 팅한 게매다 대처라서 게요 네 안다 즉 남든 셰셔버 되기 그런 찬스 싱그러 나도 세리머니도 저저 근데 지금 제인도산에 지용 전문이 되가라 벽 산재배 지금 떠주도 지디 근데 심을 통치 루문데 도면도 통치 루드게 지난주에 잡을 넣어줘. 엔 봐봐 대대 그들이야. 머니라 차. 엔 머니라 거르셔 대베이나. 시라시라 미 모서지 않나 봐. 좋아요.
So I think it was translated, but just to summarize the main point, His Holiness was making the point in response to that particular question. And there were we need to distinguish between two types of questions. One is a more practical question about the challenges, constraints imposed by introducing a new curriculum such as science, and to what extent it is affecting the timing of people spent, for example, like in memorization and recitations and so on. And the other question is a deeper question, whether or not teaching of science will undermine in the monks' faith to the Dharma in their classical studies. And the second question is more important, because here it depends very much upon the individual's relationship with the Buddha Dharma. If the individual's relationship with the Buddha Dharma is based upon some kind of a custom, some kind of a way of the Tibetan tradition, and it's very much based on faith, then there might be that potential danger. But on the other hand, as monastic scholars are supposed to be, if the individual's engagement with the Dharma is grounded upon a real study and understanding and critical reflection, then if you look at many of the Buddha's key teachings, for example, that has to do with two truths, which is understanding of the nature of reality, and also the teachings that are embodied in the Four Noble Truths, which is an attempt to integrate the understanding of nature, reality, and applying into one's life. You can also look at the teaching on bodhicitta, which is the cultivation of infinite altruism, and also wisdom. And yesterday we had discussions about, the synergy between the way in which scientists are beginning to understand what sense of self is. And there was an understanding how, in some ways, the various moves in Western philosophy and science.
가슴이 경원주 셉스 순두잖아요. 그냥 경원 코란주에서 또 고배대에서 제가 나는 이제 경원주에 제가 보시는다 고배대에서 죠.
네.
딱그 미르 잡아채 애니베 남주 탈투고도 저기 다 취소는 시나 미 때문에 신호를 넣어주래. 근데 되게 다네 애니 찍 그게 땅을 퍼서 뒤 쳐내.
So, as part of the critical reflection process, it may seem as if there is a lot of confusion. I mean, yesterday we saw how terms can mean so many different things. Different thinkers are looking at it from different angles. The same is true in the West as well as among the Nalanda scholars as well. Sometimes there is what seem like a confusion, but then if you look at the ones more settled ideas, then even in the West you can see the kind of perspectives on self beginning to move towards the Buddhist perspectives of interdependent convergence and designated self, and conventional reality. So the point is that if your understanding and if your engagement with the Dharma is really grounded upon understanding, critical reflection, there shouldn't be any danger. So this is the case in my own personal life, and it reminds me a story of Kyabje Ling Rinpoche and Kyabje Tenshan Rinpoche, my two tutors, when they first went to the West. And Kyabje Ling Rinpoche, the senior tutor, told me that when he saw all the colorful material affluence in the world and the lifestyle people were living, there was no attraction on his part because it was just so busy. There wasn't much time for people to really reflect. And he saw the kind of pointlessness of that kind of consumerist materials pursuit. And this is the kind of strength a genuine practitioner has, whose understanding of the world is really grounded upon a firm conviction in the Dharma. So for these kind of people, then there shouldn't be any problem. But one could say that, for example, His Holiness was saying that in the early days when he used to come and visit South India, there were a lot of monks chanting text, reciting text, rehearsing at night. There seemed to be fewer of them. And he says he doesn't think it has to do with science. It probably has to do with more distractions around. In the old days, there were no digital devices. There were no easy access to these entertainment devices, but now they are. So I don't think His Holiness says he doesn't think it has anything to do with the science. But when it comes to the time allotment, then it is the responsibility of the authorities to think seriously. And there will be challenges, but when you confront challenges, you should not just give up, saying this is too difficult, it's too much. Challenges should be the opportunity to rise to it. And this is really up to the authorities to see how to adjust so that the primary purpose of the monastic institution is the study of the classics in Buddhist thought, that these are not undermined, that the science study really complements them. And in fact, Buddhist scholars who have studied science will tell you that in fact the deeper understanding of the science really enhances and deepens their understanding of the Dharma. So this is the way in which the students should be guided. And in the end, it's really the responsibility of the authorities and the teachers. So don't blame me for bringing science into the monastery.
Well, thank you, Your Holiness, for your observations and advice. We're acutely aware of the shortage of time, and in the interest of time, Geshe Dadul has graciously agreed to try to compress his 15-minute talk into 5 minutes, and I hope perhaps Rinpoche also. So talk slowly, but just less.
Your Holiness, as always, it is indeed a great privilege to be in your presence and making a presentation. But at the same time, this has always been a feature when being in your presence, making presentation, that I feel nervous, at the same time very embarrassed that I would be taking some time in making not so significant a presentation. And my respects goes to all the monastics led by His Eminence Kandin Rinpoche and his two designated successors, and also to the august presenters here together with the general audience. My presentation is like this. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. My presentation will be a big shift from the previous two presenters. They dealt mainly with the administration, the organization part of it. Mine will be strictly into the, if I may, academic part of it, the translation process. So through these, you'll be opened to the translation processes that we're engaging in. Mainly my message here is to assure our scientists, as well as the monastics, that when we do the translation, we do not take it lightly, but rather we take it so seriously that we try to really catch all the nuances and convey them. And through examples, it will be apparent, I hope. So the translation process is like this. we begin with referring to any existing sources in target language. And then we refer, when it comes to actually translating a term, we refer to the origin of the terms. And then we discuss it with our peers, and then consult it with the experts in the respective fields. That would be mainly the faculty members at Emory and others. And then we try to reach consensus about the terms. Initially, the individual translators will be coining the terms, but then that will be tabled for discussion among scholars during our annual conferences. Only then those terms go into the published publications, not until then. And then, before we actually publish it, we run the manuscript through series of revisions for improvement of the rendition in language. Yet at the same time, we do not stop there. We are always open for improvement. So that's the whole process in the translation. So this is how we discuss among peers, colleagues. This is translation conference that began in 2009, and it has been annually held. The one in 2016 will be the 8th in series. This is just a sample of experts that we consult. And then the general principles that we follow is, yes, the topmost is faithful conveyance of the content at all costs. And then we try to use whatever available resources and vocabularies are there in the target language, and then maintain the feeling of a foreign setting whenever necessary to convey not just the content, but also maintain the ambiance, so that the person who reads it also gets the background thinking about it. And then strictly follow the tactical rules of the target language. They do not always match with the source language. So that part we always give the priority to the target language. And then clearly distinguish between translation and editorialization. Every now and then we remind ourselves, oh, I'm doing translation, not editorialization. And then, yes, the last is aim for a smooth flowing in the target language. So the methods employed in the actual process, wherever possible, we try to do direct translation, whereas we do that only for the common nouns, not the proper nouns. Because proper nouns such as Charles Goodman would translate as mi yakpo, choga yakpo, lakpa sangbo. But if we were to do that, it would sound like, oh, it might be a Tibetan American. So we do not do that. Whereas in translating Buddhist texts, most of the translators have done that also, translating it. Now, indirect translations, this would be an example of it. Phonetic transliteration, there are so many different ways, but we try to among those possible versions, we try to prefer the second one, the precision one, not worrying so much about how it fits with the synthetical rules of the language, but rather the phonetics. And then wherever possible, we try to add a cue to that. And then among the direct translations, there are so many different ways. We take the liberty in changing the order, if need be, adding some feature or omitting some feature if it doesn't, damage the content. And conforming to the sources, philosophical and cultural paradigms. That's what I meant by the setting. Whenever there is a foreign setting, ambience that need to be conveyed with it, we try to be sensitive to that, be that in the philosophical aspect or in the cultural aspect. Now, yeah, these synonyms, we try to be very, as I said earlier, we are taking this very seriously. Suppose, take the case of neuron and nerve cell. They mean the same thing. We could have gone with just one term, but we try to stick to the differences there and convey the different, and then stay consistent with that. And then in the case of brain cell, this is slightly different from neurons. We try to convey that to them. And then nervous system, neural system are very subtly different, and so we try to convey that. So that's an example. And then there are subtle differentiations that need to be conveyed, and then I try to come up with as compact way of conveying it. So these are examples. And then improvisation. Sometimes there is need of improvisation. Lysis, lysing, we have to take the lie part of it. Although here one dengpo is missing. I meant to put two dengbos there so that just from looking at it, it will look that it is not Tibetan. Yet at the same time, it helps in giving you the same, the original pronunciation, yet at the same time, the combination then makes it. So basically, lacing. So cell, body, and soma, I may take time here. Sometimes people take this easily and say, oh, cell body means body of a cell, which is not. Cell body is just a specific part of the body of the cell. So that's how we try to then convey it slightly different in Tibetan. Likewise, it's also called by that same name, soma, but then we try to then convey it so-lu. So that way it conveys that. There are challenges there. Then now I will not go into it, particularly about life and living in one monastic education, monastic program. Monastics make difference between living and life, whereas in English there is nothing. Where if anything is living, then you have to say that it has life, whereas the monastics, by using the Tibetan terms, tend to make a differentiation. They say, oh yeah, it is living, but it doesn't have a life. So it has to do with how we convey it in Tibetan, but these are challenges. And then impose differentiations. Sometimes we have to resort to the same existing terms, yet have to mean differently as against the usual usage of it. And then new distribution. Emotion, we use nyong sor, semnyong, for empathy, nyamnyong gesem, or nyamnyong, like that. Innovation is required. So there are still some room, some areas where we need innovation, and for that we need some consensus in how we do that. One of them is abbreviating the elements, how we abbreviate it. Right now, we either put the English one or you put the whole name, but not otherwise. Moving forward, we need to be prepared. Right now, do whatever we can at present, and then aim at uniformity, but uniformity not in a very light sense. We need to be really standardizing it. And then for that, we need to have discussion forums, and then some kind of a translation board. Translation board which consists of members from different translation boards, so that whenever some kind of a consensus is reached, that can be then carried away to the existing different translation boards, and thus that will strike uniformity. And then, yes, concerted effort from everyone. With that, I end it. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much. 15 minutes in half the time. That's great. So much work. Thank you. So next we're hearing from Yangtze Rinpoche, who's the president of Maitreya College. And we hope you can be as similarly speedy.
So, permission from His Holiness and Ganchen Rinpoche and Shajang Shuji Nambani and all the Sangha Vinaya holders, my deep homage. So my task is over here to give a different perspective, the Buddhist science to presenting in an academic setting into a secular audience. So there's a few points that I'm going to talk into these 3 points. In the West, in any kind of education, first the students are really demands is the institution is a credit or not credit. If the institution is not credit, the education is although education can be a really profound, but there is not kind of like a legal recognition for the education. So this becomes very important for the Western setting. So I'll talk a little bit about the accreditation because the college that I'm working, we're trying to get credit by, we are already credited by the state, but we are trying to get a credit from the the accrediting board. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And that's kind of like the bigger organization kind of view. And the second part is the really challenge into the classroom when you're trying to teach Buddhist science into the Western audience. What kind of they have, how they process such information. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the third point is the higher education related with the world peace. That's my personal point of view, so I'll talk that. So this is, I'm very grateful that I'm so much influenced by His Holiness. Really feel fortunate, so education is the power. So just want to put that over there. Particularly the higher education. So in the past, the countries became superpower because of the information and education, and also that will be in the present, that will be also in the future. So this kind of like nurturing education and respecting for education, I think this is like hope for this planet. So just put the statement over there. So what is accreditation? So I'm not going to go to detail because something that any 21st century in education without credit, I think it becomes kind of like a less credential, and also at the bigger picture, the longevity of the education becomes a question from my perspective. If we just stay as for example, Mind and Life institution, if this institution is a credit, I think this will be incredible. If this Mind and Life institution just stay as a level of just of an institution, I think, from my perspective, I think it becomes very limited. So, like sometimes I think there will be like Mind and Life University in Bangalore, or Mind and Life University in Boston, or something like that. So basically, a key thing is any education that we do should have something integration of the legal recognition. For example, in today's world, if individual person, we do exist, but if we don't have the government issue ID that recognize we do exist, basically we don't exist. So therefore, education should be legally recognized. So therefore, accreditation becomes, I think, a very important part of the longevity of education. So I'm not going to go through all that details. And now I'll go to, so basically, accreditation.
Down up,
The bottom up now.
Bottom up. No matter how small, you see the effect to young student, really, I say the evidence. Then time passes, I think more and more people support that, then recognition comes. The other side, something big, recognized, substance, not much.
So His Holiness, wondering that whether the top-down approach right from the beginning versus bottom-up approach, which one is more effective? The bottom-up, he would argue the bottom-up approach is more effective because if you have a real quality education and more people notices and appreciates it, then in fact the accreditation process becomes much easier because there is already a wellspring of admiration and appreciation of that quality.
Nice. So now I'll go to my pretty much last slides. This is basically not in the institution level, but it's much more in the classroom that in a Buddhist science when you're trying to teach into a secular audience. One main thing is the material. Again, same thing. Science when you're teaching in the monastery, there's like a material, and same thing. I think is facing the same kind of a challenge. And another one is the translation, and again, the same problem. When you teach a Buddhist science, since it's a science, you have to have a very accuracy. There's all the time face challenge of that, and also the methodology. When you're trying to teach the Buddhist science into a Western audience, there is a kind of like a different approach, and that approach also sometimes face some kind of difficulty challenge. So furthermore, taking a time. This is a prayer, His Holiness. May you live a very long life and to wish fulfill all your holy wish. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all four of the presenters. This concludes the first part of our afternoon session. And now we'll segue to a concluding session.
Musical chairs. Matt, come. There's a space here. There's a space here. Why don't you move up?
I want to thank the Tibetan scholars so much for their extraordinary effort in integrating science into the monastic curriculum. I mean, it's just astonishing to have been part of Mind and Life since its onset, and to see the work that Emory and other institutions have done in bringing science into the foreground for monastics. And I very much appreciate the intention to do this for the nuns as well. I just want to kind of underline that. But this kind of integration makes it more possible for deeper collaborations between Buddhist scholars, Tibetan scholars, and Western scholars and scientists. So the conversations that we are engaged in here in Mind and Life take on whole other dimensions when there is a kind of common ground which we share. So we have 30 minutes for the concluding session, and we're going to ask John Dunn to do a very brief summary of the arc of our time together.
Thank you, Joan. Your Holiness, it's a difficult task to summarize our last few days together because we've covered a lot of ground. We've had a wide-ranging conversation, but let me just remind us of some of the key points of each of our speakers. And of course, we began with Thupten Jinpa himself, whose account of the Buddhist theory of perception. One of the key points that raised for us was the way in which examining our own experience in this rigorous way actually reveals that much of what we take for granted may in fact be false or deluded. In particular, there's a very strong connection, as Thupten Jinpa showed, between perception and concepts. We then moved on to Pawan Sinha, And one of the most important features of Pawan Sinha's talk is the way in which that visual system itself actually develops, is highly plastic, so there's a great possibility for transformation, but also that visual system develops as a child, one of the Prakash children, is enacting themselves in the world, is active in the world, that there's a need for movement, for dynamic information processing, and that this process of developing perception is not just a bottom-up process, but also a top-down process. We then had Kathy Kerr's presentation, and part of what Kathy Kerr showed us is the importance of the complexity of this relationship between the top-down and the bottom-up. When we look at the sense of the body, bodily perception in particular, we see that the mind, signals of pain, for example, from the gut, can be enhanced by the way they're interpreted in the mind, but likewise, that same enhancement can have a rebound effect. There is a relationship between the top-down and the bottom-up. When we attend to a sensation in our finger, the way we attend to that sensation can enhance the signal, but that then the enhanced signal then alters our interpretation also. So there's a kind of very complex reciprocal process where really making the distinction between top and bottom becomes very difficult. I then spoke about the way in which Buddhists theorize the formation of concepts. And one of the key issues in the Buddhist theory of formation, of concept formation, is that our concepts of the world are not simply categories out there in the world, but they are dependent very much on our interests. They are dependent upon what we seek to obtain and what we seek to avoid, and even to some extent our emotional states. This can be carried even further into the role that language plays in concept formation, and that's what Lera Boroditsky brought to our understanding. One of the most important aspects of this, of course, is not simply that our own experiences form our concepts, but the cultures in which we're embedded and the languages that we use also have a tremendous effect. And a lot of these effects can be conceptualized as being in a kind of top-down process. Now, both perception and concepts are very closely tied to the self. The self is the one who is enacting those concepts in the world. The self appears to be the one who is receiving those perceptions or actually enacting those perceptions. And so we had an entire day then in which we talked about the self. Geshe Ishitubge focused especially on the way in which Buddhists negate a particular kind of self, but not self in general. And J. Garfield helped us to see the way in which seeing through the illusion of self enables us to have a kind of moral perception that sees others in a way that no longer reifies them into selves as that illusion would have us do. Finally, Vasu, yesterday afternoon, gave us an account of the development of self, moving from a very basic sense of the self as a perceiver into a much more complex sense of self that is in relation to the other, something that we see emerging very early in infants. Matthew then brought this all together, especially in terms of altruistic action in the world. How does our sense of who we are, how does the way we see the world, how does the way we think of the world, how can all of that come together in compassionate action? And Richie then led us into some of the actual research that is already emerging in this direction, and then some of the potential future research that we see that comes out of these kinds of understandings and insights. So that's been our entire, in 4 minutes, that's been our entire week. I hope that it made some sense, and it gives us some basis for summarizing our conversation now.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John, especially for the wonderful integration. I'd like to just spend a few moments reflecting on the extraordinary setting in which this meeting has occurred. The value, Your Holiness, of meeting in a monastic setting. This is our second meeting in a monastery. And to witness firsthand the extraordinary change that Your Holiness's vision has brought about. I was so touched sitting on the steps and listening to the debate, observing the debate about waves and particles. And I just whispered to Thupten Jinpa, can you have envisioned when you were in the monastery that a debate like this would ever be occurring? And it's remarkable to see the transformation that's occurred and the wellspring of activity that this has catalyzed. And I reflect in many ways on the conservatism and stasis of the academy in the United States. I suspect this is true of most parts of the Western world. In many ways, I think that what you have done in the monasteries reflects a greater openness and permeability than we see in the United States. Despite the fact that there is great freedom in the United States, there is a there is an inherent conservatism, and it's difficult for me to envision such a large collection of American academics from different disciplines listening to a group of geshes discourse on the nature of perception and the self. And so I think this is a testament to something really extraordinary that is occurring. One of the other great contributions that I think we've taken from the dialogues with Buddhism has been an emphasis on plasticity, on the possibility of change. And while certainly there's a lot of scientific research that's now consistent with that, you've helped us to focus on plasticity, particularly in domains that really matter in our individual lives. And you've shown us, by example, the importance of warm-heartedness and how an understanding at a very deep level of innate basic goodness can transform everyday life. And so I think that this is something that the scientists will take away from their time here and will begin to think about how it can get translated into their own work in America and elsewhere in the world. So
we can do it.
So we have just a little bit of time left, and I think now is a time to just ask each of the participants to reflect very briefly on her or his experiences, and then to also ask Your Holiness to reflect. So,
and in this regard, I think it's really important for us to think about the way forward, the questions that we feel are important as we move out of this meeting to bring it not only into our disciplines, but also into the mission of Mind and Life. So maybe we can begin with Jinpa.
I don't think I mean, it's been a real pleasure and privilege to be part of this gathering, and also have the opportunity to really present, in some sense, represent the voice of the Tibetan monastic academia here. And one thing that I would take home is, as an interpreter, translator myself, the need for even more self-critical awareness of the way in which we use terms. And one thing that became very, very clear here is the word perception is used in a really, really different way, in different contexts. The other thing is that also, I was particularly struck by Lara's presentation, because one of the implicit kind of, ideas in Dhammakirti is the philosophy of language. And I noticed in Lara's presentation, there's a lot more explicit exploration in the area where Dharmakirtian approach tends to assume, and this seems to be one area where I personally felt that I might actually learn more. But one thing that was very moving for me personally is, Your Holiness, in your opening remarks, you really made the powerful case of why science in a monastery. And right now, just a few minutes before, you spoke about how a real study of science should not undermine the veracity of the classical education. And this was very moving, and I see you as, of course, a father figure of the Tibetan monastic academia, and it was just so moving to see you express the sense of concern that you have for this education. And I'm not a monk anymore, but it's something that I care deeply. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. As a scientist, I'm deeply impressed by how very little we actually know about the human mind and about the human experience. There are 7,000 languages in the world, and only 10% of those are well described. About 98% of what we know about the mind and the brain is based on American college students. And so that way of doing science makes our findings really biased and really narrow. And so science has to broaden out if we're going to really understand human experience in all its richness. And of course, one way is for scientists to come here and speak to you, but another way is for everyone here to start doing your own science and start contributing your experiences and your findings and your voices to the scientific community. Because science is not just something that you learn, science is something that you do. It's a practice. And you don't need a fancy degree to do it, you just need knowledge and you need to use the scientific method. And so I hope that these kinds of dialogues will lead many more people around the world to contribute to science. And without all of your help, we actually can never achieve a very good science of the mind.
Well, Lara, thank you.
Thank you. Your Holiness, it's been a real privilege to be here with you and with these wonderful colleagues this week, and to be so well received by the community here, even though they all know much more about Dharmakirti than I do. One of the things that I think has most arisen for me is the importance, but the potential importance of what we might call the view, the tawa, and the implication, especially tawa. The implication, especially in this context, is that our view actually may have a tremendous impact on the way we interpret our world and the way we behave. So in what way do we change our view concretely? What are the practices that change our view? And can we actually do research that examines the process of changing the view and enacting that changed view in the world? Some of that kind of research already exists. Some is being done in our center at Madison, but I think there's much more to explore in this regard.
Your Holiness, it's been a true honor for me to have been here in your presence and in the presence of this distinguished gathering. And this meeting over the past 4 days has exemplified, amplified, and reinforced a theme that I deeply cherish, and that's the theme of bringing together the worlds of the heart and mind, the notion of compassionate science. And I believe that that's an avenue that is going to become more and more powerful and more fruitful as we progress further. And it's precisely these kinds of dialogues that are going to show to the world the power and the importance of undertaking that approach. Thank you very much.
Your Holiness, thank you again deeply for this honor of being here and of listening to your views. The thing that I take away from here is, again, this idea something that you have spoken very much about the inseparability, the connection between the organism which knows, whether it's monastic, and that which we know. And I think one of the things that struck me is how little we know about the different paths that the mind can take and that context and engagements can provide. And my wish would be that both in science and in the way in which we incorporate science into society, we take seriously the idea that people are to be seen as subjects, as thous, and not as objects. And how we actually fully implement it, I don't know, because we are still in the mood of objectifying everything. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Your Holiness, it is always an honor and a privilege to be in your presence. It is an honor to be in this august university with this wonderful Sangha, and also to be in the company of such esteemed colleagues. And so I thank you for that opportunity. I think we've learned a lot here, and one of the things we've learned is that science can be pursued in a way that takes human beings seriously. We've seen that in Vasu's science, in Lara's science, in Kathy's science, and in particular in Pawan's science. We've also seen that science can be a deep force for good, and that it ought to be a force for good. But we've also seen, especially in Mathu's work, that philosophy and understanding can equally be a force for good. And I think that's extraordinarily important to remember that philosophical study as well as scientific study can deepen our understanding. In my own work as a translator, I'm always dismayed by how much, as Richie mentioned, the Western world is capable of ignoring the riches of the Buddhist philosophical world. And I'm also, when I teach in Buddhist institutions, always dismayed at how little Western philosophy is appreciated. So one of the things that I would urge going forward is more dialogue that integrates both philosophy and science in the service of good, and integrating Western and Tibetan approaches in science and philosophy. I think it's extremely important as we move forward, but always with the notion that we're moving towards the good, and that we Madhyamikas have to stick together.
Today, Jamba tos Jurona. That did Kashu and Namjungazo, Semeshung, the Tisunalia, Musum da Jeba, Togba, Musum de Chitanranse, Tungone Janedi, Shembache, Tambutoma de Liagic, Tungone Jane Milu, Shebashiran, Kegores, teaches on any punch, Nezumabuja Shea, give you to that to be a shadow. Togwata, Trisha, some of the Tansha yours. Tamadilla to Ransan on Echitolia, Lepure, Songo, Tison Nashingi, Tisumba Nashingi, Datarin and the Tenrichona Sumba and the Carsona, give you the Nutrivic, Simjangi Kurokan Exedo, and the Lobson get when I love to Santillo Lobson to Kashi, Taribata, Soaribata, and the Soribata Tezulia. Nang do was so simply do a chamset on it. That they don't want to sit down, Corine Kangadi, you will coach on the intervention in Bonashi. It in the share on the Seni was Seni get shaggy now is Mado, now Chick Maditer of Tindache marriage. Puchunju gives you nails on the Samutang nails on the Tadi will love nails on the Tama Chamzet on the Pame social chamzi, Rangaran chamzi, Tibachizole, Jackie and Chego, son du sang. Tondako Karsule, Serita Nangduri when you get Serita Nangduri when you get on it, Nichuzolia, Pendol of Chimbush and do some Samluti Laria, Shukchera Corsua.
Was it translated or?
Just the end.
Okay. So just to Geshe-la was giving the analogy. There is an idea in Buddhist epistemological thinking that when it comes to the process of human cognition, we begin with a direct perception that is closer to reality, And then when that perception is clear, it gives rise to perceptual judgment. And based upon that, you can infer various qualities of that object. But that chain of inference, in order for it to help us serve our purpose, it needs to be a valid chain. So which means ultimately it also ends up in a direct experience of contact with the real thing in the world. So there is a kind of an arc. And in this, there is this idea that the underlying drive is a kind of a human desire to achieve a goal. So similarly, listening to the presentations here, we know that one thing that was made very clear is that the classical Indian understanding that if you look at any human activity, whether it is linguistics, whether it is arts and crafts, even whether it is parenting, all of that has to be driven by some kind of desire to fulfill a goal. There's a kind of a purpose. And that fact was made very clear in this conversation when you listen to many different presentations coming from many different disciplines, but all of them is pointing towards this human quest for knowledge, human quest to fulfill some aim, whether it is one's own personal needs or whether it's the more altruistic needs of the larger society. And that's something that I will take home.
So whenever we are together in a Mind and Life event, whether in this kind of setting or different part of the world, many times comes to mind what Your Holiness said in 2000, the first meeting I was present, when you said at middle of the week, it's all nice what we discussed, but what can we contribute to society? And of course, to contribute something to society, it has to begin with the person, individual change. Otherwise, if we don't transform ourselves, how can we transform the world or at least serve others? And for instance, in the humanitarian world, we see that all the time. Purpose is to help others. Then we start, then personal conflict. If things go worse, corruption, and the whole goal is lost because of human shortcomings. So somehow the messenger has to be the message. We have to embody what we try to do, and that has to come to personal change. So in a way, the good thing about that is no matter what happens, even people don't treat us well, or if things don't go the way we want, or some unpredictable events occur, at least there's always a way to transform yourself, and therefore to contribute to transform the world. So I also remember once, to summarize in 4 words, once I was traveling in India in 1967, and I went to a Hindu ashram. There was the bust of the founder, and below it says just, be good, do good. I thought that's a nice motto.
Thank you, Your Holiness. It's very moving for me to be here, and I'm just so honored to be sharing with this incredible group of people. And I think the main takeaway that I have is something that you said on the first day, which was the sense of urgency of, that we have to move to action now. It's not about prayer or, it's just sitting on our cushions, but there's a sense of urgency. And I am trying to do that in my own work, but there's a way in which, when I work on the basic science mechanisms, it's very important to be very careful and rather slow. And actually, I think that we have a need to translate some of these mechanisms more quickly and try to bring some help to patients and people who are suffering. And I say that as somebody who has dealt with cancer myself. I think that there's just a way in which what I'm going to bring back to Brown and to my colleagues is that sense of the fierce urgency of now, of just let's see what we can do. Let's push it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I share everyone's sense of gratitude that we are all here. It's actually an immense privilege, and so that makes it also a burden and a responsibility in a way to go forward. And so, although I resonate with all the things that people have said, I also want to share this issue of right view, the issue of our understanding of perception, our understanding of concepts, and our need for action can all be brought together in many ways, but many of us are professors, and we teach. And so one of my big missions, and yes, I work in the Emory-Tibet Science Initiative, but actually my big mission that I and my students in my laboratory are working on right now is how we transform the way in which we teach. And so teaching is about not just science, it's about changing the mind, changing to better view, building skills so that students will be empowered not for knowledge, but for the ability to work and think more effectively in the world. And so I hope that through all our work, and certainly it's my aspiration, that I will become a better educator and help to change the way we think and act about education. Thank you.
Professor was.
I think the deepest reason for our presence here is to end suffering. That is our shared imperative. I so appreciate your comment, Pawan, about the integration of mind and heart, and I would say mind, heart, and body. To name the three domains of subjectivity, but I would say it's mind, heart, body, and the world. That we're not separate from this. And this sense, I feel, is captured in what you transmitted, Kathy, and many of us here in this circle have transmitted, the sense of urgency, that this is not time to squander these precious moments when we're at a climate tipping point with globalization, commodification. Mind Life has always had a compassion-based vision and mission. But the sense of urgency, the imperative that whatever we engage in here as a community of practitioners of science and also of contemplation as scholars, that we dedicate it completely to the ending of suffering. Thank you.
Your Holiness, it's always such an inspiration to be in your presence and in the hats that I wear as a member of the board of Mind and Life and also in our own center at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Being in your presence helps to build the confidence that the work we're doing is really incredibly important, and we will rededicate ourselves to do this work in a way which will benefit as many beings as we possibly can. And I simply want to express our deepest, deepest gratitude for all of your time, which has been so extraordinary over such an extended number of decades. It's breathtaking to see what you have been able to achieve with the meetings that we've had and the change that's been produced. May your life be long. May you continue to inspire us. And we look forward to our continuing interactions. Thank you so much, Your Holiness. And now Susan Bauer-Wu, is the president of Mind and Life, would like to have the final closing words.
Stand. Okay. Well, it has been an incredible honor for me. This is my second week as president of Mind and Life, and to be here and to start this way is perfect. So I'm really honored and delighted. And I'd like to end by thanking a few people that made this possible, but there are so many people that made this very special event possible. And of course, I can't name everybody, but I will do my best to acknowledge many. So I begin with Your Holiness. Thank you. Thank you for your generous spirit and presence throughout this entire meeting. Very important, so thank you. And also for bringing the monastic community here to participate in this really historical discussion. To be here in this presence with all of them was really special. So thank you for bringing the community to us and us to them. And also for your years of dedication. 3 decades and longer you've been at this. And bringing the conversation between scientists and scholars to engage in the interaction of Buddhist science and modern science in the service of humanity. So important, so thank you. And I next want to thank the venerable abbots and members of the Serachi community and the 2 colleges, Sera J and Sera May. Thank you for your very warm hospitality, welcoming us to your community, and just helping us to feel very much welcome and to be here with you. So thank you all. And to the Dalai Lama Trust India, our partners, co-hosts of this event, the generous support, the financial support that helped to make this event possible, and not only possible, but to help it be such a success. Really very deeply thanks, and especially a thanks to Jinpa Lundup and his entire team for partnering with us. So thank you, Dalai Lama India. And to the staff of the Office of His Holiness, and a special thank you to Secretary Cheme Rinsen, who's been here with us throughout, and also to Tenzin Tagla for working closely with us in our organization of this event. And special thank you to the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Geshe Lalakdor and your team for all the translation of the slides, the written materials, so important to make this possible. So thank you so much. And to the simultaneous translators. They have worked nonstop. Every minute of this entire event, they have been working. So our thanks to all of them. Yeah. And the AV support. The AV support has been incredible. So we thank the team of the Dalai Lama Trust India who made it possible for the live streaming for thousands of people around the world, all continents, to be able to participate in this event with us. So we thank them. And also the on-the-ground AV support, and to the Renault AV team who have been working tirelessly to help us with all the logistics with AV. So thank you. and to the speakers. So the speakers around this table, those who were at the other events that we hosted, really for your beautiful presentations, so enlightening and so inspiring, and also for taking the time to be here. It's a long time to be here, and it's a very long trip. And so I'm very grateful for you to share and to be here. Just a few more. Like to acknowledge the Hershey Family Foundation, who are very important supporters of the Mind and Life Institute and really helped us to all be here today. And I know that Barry Hershey and Connie Hershey send their regards to everyone. And my final thank yous will be Mind and Life specific, because it really takes a village for us to be here. So just a few acknowledgements. To the Mind and Life board and to our members who are here, particularly to our chair, Jinpa. He has been our wonderful leader and also presenter and translator. Deep bow, thank you. And other members, just to acknowledge, who are here, Richie and Roshi Joan, and also to Carolyn Jacobs. Thank you. Thank you to the planning committee. This was an incredible, incredible dialogue. So the members of the committee, Jinpa, Carol Worthman, Jay Garfield, Richie Davidson, and Wendy Hassenkamp. So thank you for just all of your attention of putting together such a fine program. And to the Mind and Life staff, to those that are not here, as well as those that are here. Liza Katz, your attention to detail made it possible. And to Wendy, and to Ned Dunn for his technical support. And it really does take a village to be able to put together something like this and to do it so well and have it be such a success. And a final thank you to the audience who is here, to all of you participants, the monastic community, and our special honorable guests for being here for the entire time of this event. It has helped to make it be an even more rich and meaningful experience. So we hope to see you at another Mind and Life event. And until we meet again, may you all be very well. Thank you.
Your Holiness, would you like to make a few final words?
디션이 되어서 아마 아주디 천일부님도 두 구두샤들이 막 이렇게 더 나오셔 두신 고소리 인슈고 걸리리야다 디 걸리리야다 그즉 편도 첨부로 통제 나데 대산을 찾았다 지금도 자라 가셔야겠다 데 저 토나다 또 무슨 참 지식 수대요래 다른 시간에 지식 소는 천리변 날에 양지 다 심주체세 유사와로 지다 지 간다지 미 남주 따세 유르고 자치로 친데서지 참 편도 있지 요 정도요래 자상가 당한서 아주 미개버소소스 직대다 아주 구두르체 전에르체 직 소소소다 직 로지를 주었다 뒤지고 말해 당 아주 뭐냐라 직 가서 우리 한번 칠수 시합이나 미 루규나라 다직 삼루 동조로 지 아주 쌉두지 다시로 다야지 폐지 요면서 그러지. 그냥 신주국에 계셔 말이 꼭 간단 거에는 전문이 되간다. 강에 먹고 싶지. 미스에 강에지. 미스에 강에디 다 컨저스는 세고도 삼바지. 내가 또 삼으로 내게요. 내가 눈이 딱 와셔야 돼. 미 동주도 주셔야 돼. 이 삼으로 그냥 개이 되지. 자다 되는 인도사는 안 줘야 내가 뒤 간다지. 남주고 타네. 지 미경으로 양보치하도 첩지 전문이 되간 거 까녀디에 직다 세야게 직다 차진으로 첨부질을 모주네 직도 두트야지. 그래서 인도자는 아주 미결로 소수다. 지 가서 우리 그게 더 나치하다. 지 소수 인두스라서 지금人民도 그냥 참으러 디 공부 장제. 당서 결국 소수 미지 샤셔는 고 차이거래. nga shashina da lo di taji le tegi yore da shirasha yamare sa dini indu zane da mi kergu sosu da misi chigi kiri ina ko da chaynge shin risha da nga zu de chigi namju gi chigi samtong da saba chigi du pe yundu zane da dindre gi samju di da tiru nishu zaji wo zamdo masebe tiru nishu zani wo zosu zuna lo le marle tuya chigi dindre chigi tane da roa biliya shamdi tuya ruchi 이 최배에 계시게 말해. 나다 미 동주 삼월로 동계배도도 대원도 시작해. 동계 먹고지 삼도 동다 자총자. 미장 양보지 딱 못 들으셔다. 뒤 제기 강에 가서 삼신도 강에 속에 수지예요 말이야. 이제 소소 패버 중로 삼네. 지듭지기 겜배. 자야 삼고 다시 무슨 말이 있잖아요. 이 지듭디 패너서비 지들이 또 레벨을 신도돼야지 이혼되기도 와. 저사들이 인들 괜찮아서 나투시 송도돼 나투시 싸워 말해. 가다가 아주 컨셉트다 지금 로드를 가서 또 삼도 나지게 되었다디. 아주 삼월로 지금 닝을 장네. 다 차도 참수. 소소스 대전 지로 가와요네. 어디서냐 두구를 시키다 싫어나서 쉬어지기.
So, what I wanted to share was that just few points. One is that initially, when I first began engagement with scientists and science, the primary motivation was really driven by my personal curiosity. But as time went on, it became increasingly evident that there is actually some potential benefit that could be brought to the larger society. And for example, because of this, a new initiative for bringing science into the monastic education began, initially with a few hundred selected monk students, and then of course, over time, becoming more integrated into the curriculum. And on the part of the scientists too, it seems that as a result of our conversations and others, that perhaps one could say a kind of a new area of investigation seemed to have opened in the science, particularly in kind of, what is known as the contemplative science, where a way of an attempt to understand how conscious mental training such as meditation can affect real change at the behavioral level. So there seems to be, even for the scientist, a benefit, a real benefit in the way in which it opens up a new field of inquiry in science itself. So, so in this conversation, when we had the dialogue, of course, each of us who have participated in the dialogue really enjoyed it. We felt stimulated. We will take something from this, but my own sense is that the purpose is not just that. There's a greater purpose. And what we need to do is all of us to really kind of consciously reflect on this purpose. What is that collective purpose? And what is emerging here, and if I can be bold here, is to say that, in this kind of conversation, in this kind of exchange, what we are proposing is actually a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at the problem. Because if you look at the needs and problems of the world, I always say that many of the problems that we human beings face are actually problems created by ourselves. And if that is the case, then logically the solutions also lie in our own hands. And there is also, if you look at the 7 billion people on this earth, there is not a single person who intentionally wishes to seek suffering and problem. Everybody wishes to be happy. Everybody wishes to overcome suffering. And, driven by that motivation, we go about in our own, daily life. But of course, we, in the process, out of short-sightedness, out of ignorance, out of misunderstanding, we create the conditions of our own suffering. So this kind of work that we are presenting here is really proposing a kind of a new way of looking at these problems and taking the role of individual human beings seriously in the process of this developing solution for the human problems that we have ourselves created. And this is something that I feel is important, because otherwise, if it is only a matter of individual interest and individual benefit, then say, for example, I'm already in my 80, reached 80 years old, and my remaining years is that not much left. So if it is only about ourselves, then it's very limited of its benefit and purpose. But if we think about what we are doing as some connection with the needs and well-being of the larger humanity, then we are talking about generations. We can even envision the kind of work that we are doing moving forward into the 21st, 22nd century, 23rd century, and so on. And in this way, we could, offer possibly a way of looking at problems and way of dealing with problems where we really bring the insights through science and philosophy, including Buddhist science and Buddhist philosophy, into the service of larger humanity. We're not talking about propagating Buddhism. We're not talking about propagating religion. We're talking about an integrated way of dealing with problems and solve human problems. So everybody said here, thank you to me. Actually, you don't need to say thank you to me. Rather, you need to take these points at home and try to see in your own everyday life, in your own discipline, in your own community, what are the opportunities where you can bring this out and make it real.
If we really love Tang, then let the generation of 22nd century or 23rd century, let them remember our sort of certain work which we started. And it makes some because of the benefit through generations. So let them say Tang.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then usually I sort of telling or expressing the two generations, generation of 20th century, generation of 21st century. So we all belongs 20th century. We are now walking towards end of our life because we belong to 20th century gone. So now, you see, our real responsibility, bring some new sort of concept, and it helped to develop holistic view, a generation of 21st century. Then they will sort of, I think they have the opportunity to create better, happier 21st century. Isn't it? This one thing. Then I want to mention, you see, another thing. Now this time, you Indians, see here. So all our knowledge come from India.
Tibetan knowledge.
All our Tibetan knowledge, Buddhist knowledge, come from India. So actually, all these concepts is India's ancient knowledge or the thoughts like that. So modern Indian, I usually used to describe modern Indian too much westernized. So bit neglect about 1,000-year-old your own sort of real sort of the ancient tradition. These ancient tradition, time change. Some ancient tradition is outdated. Even better to forget. some bad habit in this country still carry as a part of your traditions. Caste system, because of dowry system, all these. I think now time come, you see, eventually should cease. But then some of these ancient sort of Indian sort of knowledge is not just ancient knowledge, but very relevant to today's world. These, you Indian, historically, our guru. So guru should take more, pay more attention about your own the ancient knowledge, which is something relevant to today's world. So now this time, you see, you participated. I very, very, very sort of appreciate it. Thank you. Another point, now forget, stop now. Although we have no intention, you see, try to propagate Buddhism, Buddha Dharma. But when we discuss, you see, the Buddhist science or Buddhist philosophy, you see, there is some connection. So many of you see, mentioned dialogue between Buddhism and modern science. So I prefer, you see, Buddhist country like Japan or Thai, Burma, these, and eventually China and Taiwan. Now these, I mean, historically, their own traditional belief or religion is Buddhism. So I feel this is something more suitable. This kind of meeting, if possible. This is some Buddhist country. In the past also I suggested. So that I want to share with you. So now only my last wish is now the quite serious sort of flu. So scientists bring some method to stop this.